Think back for a moment to the fall of 2020. The pandemic upended American life. The death of George Floyd sparked a global reckoning on race, and the presidential election was right around the corner, Trump versus Biden. For our next guest, it was the perfect time for a road trip to get away. Francis Berry and his wife traveled coast to coast in a 2017 Winnebago RV. They headed west along the Lincoln Highway and returned through the South. Along the way, he had many conversations about the state of this country, and it is all in the book, Back Roads and Better Angels, a journey into the heart of American democracy, which is available now. And Francis Berry joins me now in studio. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
My parents took us on a cross-country road trip. Not the Lincoln Highway, but similar thing in 1988. Like, the thing I remember more than anything, you remembered, I think, for some different reasons. Why did you first decide? Because there was so much happening at the time, and you're like, I'm just going to take a road trip.
Well, there was so much happening at the time, and there had been so much written on what divides us as a country, and so much focus on explaining red America to blue America and all of the polarization. And I wanted to go exploring what holds the country together. And what better way to do that than to follow the Lincoln Highway?
The Lincoln Highway, for those who don't know, is this route. It was basically the way you got across the country before major highways existed.
Before there was a highway.
Yeah.
In fact, the Lincoln Highway isn't a highway.
Yeah.
It's a series of local roads. It was dedicated in 1913, back when it was mostly dirt roads. And there are still parts of it that are dirt roads.
You've written speeches for Mike Bloomberg for a long time. So you talk about politics a lot in the book. You talk about music a lot. You talk about this journey that you went on. What did you find that you weren't expecting?
I was very heartened by the faith that people expressed in the country. I heard a lot of frustration from both Democrats and Republicans that we spoke to. We talked to people from all different walks of life, and there was a lot of frustration in both parties about the deep divisions facing the country. I wasn't entirely expecting to hear it from both sides, but we did. But I also heard a real faith in the resilience of the country.
Yeah.
People weren't always sure how we were going to overcome it, but there was a belief in the country and our values in a way that would allow us to overcome it.
I think it happens a lot. There's so much shouting at the extremes that nobody pays attention to, that a lot of people are just normal and rational.
That's right.
In ways, right?
That's right. And the more that you talk with people and we wanted to step out of the campaign cycle. And so we didn't focus on Biden and Trump. We talked to people about national issues, but from a much more local and personal perspective. And the more that you do that, I think the more opportunity there is for finding common ground and recognizing that while the extremes get all of the attention, there's actually an awful lot of common ground in the middle.
You talk a lot about Lincoln as you traveled the Lincoln Highway. Why do his lessons remain so important today?
Lincoln, more than anyone, held the country together through our darkest hour. And so I think it's only natural to turn to him at a time of these deep divisions and, again, look for lessons from him. And there are a ton. Including one that here in New York City, the speech that launched him to the presidency in 1860 is famous for the lines, let us have faith that might makes right. But we often forget at the end of that line, he said, and in that faith, let us do our duty as we understand it. And that little phrase, as we understand it, reflected Lincoln's humility that he may not be entirely right, that he was willing to recognize people approach things from different perspectives and bring their own personal circumstances to issues. I think the more that we can see of that in each other, the better off we'll be. You
talk about this in the book, but in the madness of everything that was happening, when you went and said to your bosses, I want to take a road trip in an RV, I'm going to take off for a bit, they said what?
They said, are you crazy? Which is about what my wife said as well, because it was the pandemic and we were in lockdown. But what better time to do it? We were both working remotely, and it was a now or never situation.
We mentioned your work with Mike Bloomberg, who was often talked about as a potential independent or third-party candidate for president. It didn't happen. But I wanted to ask you how you felt about the viability of, because everybody talks about it every cycle. Oh, I wish there was another choice.
Right.
But there's usually not. And there is one, I mean, RFK is going to be on the ballot in places here. How has that changed?
It hasn't changed. Third parties are not really viable. We're not going to elect a third-party candidate president. But there are ways to, the frustration is real, I think, that leads people to the third party. And that's something that both parties can tap into. And I think you see third parties from time to time because both parties are doing such a bad job of it.
Is there a thing that could happen, you think, systemically to make it more viable for a potential third party?
Yeah, so we visited, for instance, on the road trip, Lincoln, Nebraska. And Lincoln has a nonpartisan election system. And so you don't run in a partisan Democratic primary or partisan Republican primary. Everyone appears on the same ballot, and all voters, even if you're independents, can vote. And that actually opens up the process in a similar way that a third-party candidacy would to people who are not coming from your traditional political backgrounds. And it allows people to appeal to a broader base.
Interesting. All right, the book is here. I'm going to show it here one more
Great.
time here. Maybe we can zoom in, because I love it when writers like yourself take these big swings, and there you go. Back Roads and Better Angels from Francis Asbury. Good to meet you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks very much.
All right.